Welcome to the deep dive. We dig into the sources so you don't have to, giving you that shortcut to being well informed. Today, we're looking at something that might seem super specific: the global automotive shift lever market. I mean, when you think about the huge auto industry, all the changes happening, the shift lever probably isn't the first thing that springs to mind, right? But the numbers we found in the Global Automotive Shift Lever Market Report 2025-2033, they're actually pretty eye-opening. So our mission today is to cut through all that data and figure out what this, surprisingly significant corner of the industry tells us about the bigger picture.
Yeah, what's really fascinating, I think, is how just one component, a vital one like the shift lever, can almost act like a barometer. It reflects these big global economic trends, shifts in consumer behavior. It's kind of a micro view into these huge macro forces, especially now when we hear so much about massive transformations in the auto world.
Absolutely. So, okay, let's start high level. What are the big global numbers telling us? The report shows that back in 2021, this market was already pulling in, what, $11.5 billion dollars. And it's not just staying flat, it's growing pretty significantly, actually. By 2025, it's expected to be nearly $13.5 billion, dollars, and then climbing again to around $18.4 billion dollars by 2033. That's a compound annual growth rate, a CAGR of almost 4% globally.
Right, and that CAGR, that nearly 4% growth year on year smoothed out. That's pretty telling. It suggests that, despite everything we hear about the big push towards electric vehicles, autonomous driving, there's still a huge and actually expanding market for traditional cars with internal combustion engines. And naturally, for components like shift levers, especially in certain parts of the world, it sort of pushes back gently against the idea that this whole segment is just, rapidly vanishing.
Okay, that global view is definitely surprising. So let's dig into the regions now and see where this growth is really topping. First up, North America. And the data here shows some interesting differences within the region. Overall, North America looks strong, growing from about $2.5 billion dollars in 2021 to over $4 billion dollars projected for 2033. That growth rate is actually a bit above the global average. But the really interesting part is how that growth is spread out.
Exactly. You've got the US and Canada showing, solid, steady growth, predictable almost. But then there's Mexico. It's really sprinting ahead. The market for shift levers there is projected to almost double between 2021 and 2033. That's a growth rate near 5% a year, clearly the leader in North America.
Wow, nearly 5% from Mexico. That really stands out compared to the US and Canada. So what's driving that? What's making Mexico such a hot spot for this particular component right now?
Well, it seems to be a mix of things. The report points towards significant investments by major automakers. They're leveraging things like favorable trade deals, lower production costs, particularly for vehicle assembly. So Mexico is becoming this critical hub, not just for cars sold in Mexico, but for exporting vehicles and parts across North America and maybe beyond.
Ah, okay. So it's less about a sudden boom in Mexican car buyers and more about Mexico's role in the bigger manufacturing picture.
Precisely. It reflects a strategic shift in where cars and their parts are being made and exported from. It really paints a picture of, global production strategies consolidating in certain areas.
That makes sense. Okay, fascinating stuff in North America. Let's hop across the pond to Europe. Europe's market started around the same size as North America's, roughly $2.5 billion dollars in 2021. And it's also projected for pretty healthy growth, hitting nearly $4 billion dollars by 2033. The CAGR there is right around 4%, matching the global average.
Yeah, and within Europe, Germany is still, unsurprisingly, a major player. Its growth rate is actually quite strong, over 4.25%. France is also looking robust, around 4.2%. And then you see steady contributions from the UK, Italy, Russia. The picture for Europe seems to be one of a, let's say, mature market, but one that's still growing consistently, probably driven by regular vehicle replacement cycles and ongoing production strength.
And it's not just the big economies either, is it? The report mentions countries like Spain, Sweden, Denmark, Switzerland, Luxembourg. They're all chipping in with steady growth rates too, suggesting pretty broad-based demand across the continent.
That's right. Consistent, solid growth seems to be the theme for Europe.
Okay, now let's turn to Asia Pacific. The report really highlights this region as a powerhouse for growth. The numbers here are big, jumping from about $2.6 billion dollars in 2021 to over $4.3 billion dollars by 2033. And the growth rate reflects that over 4.1% annually.
Absolutely. If you look at the overall global auto market, Asia Pacific is just huge and it's growing fast. Shift levers are definitely part of that story. China, especially, is leading the way. Its growth rate for shift levers is close to 4.4%. We're talking about a market going from under $500 million just for this one component up to almost $800 million. It just underscores the sheer scale of vehicle production and sales happening in China. It's a massive engine for the whole industry.
And it's not just China, right? The report also shows pretty solid growth in Japan and India. Plus, promising expansion across South Korea, Australia, Singapore, Taiwan, Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
That's a really dynamic picture across the board there.
Definitely. A major driver of the global market's expansion is happening in Asia Pacific.
All right, moving on down to South America. The market size is smaller here, obviously, but still showing decent growth. It's expected to go from around $870 million in 2021 to over $1.3 billion by 2033. That's a steady CAGR of about 3.6%.
Yeah, and Brazil, being the region's largest economy, naturally accounts for a big chunk of that. Its growth is pretty much in line with the regional average. We also see consistent growth in other key countries like Argentina, Colombia, Chile, reflecting steady, if maybe not explosive, vehicle demand.
Okay, how about the Middle East? The report suggests a pretty notable rise there, too. Revenues climbing from about $750 million in 2021 towards $1.2 billion plus by 2033, and a strong growth rate over 4%.
Yes, and what's particularly interesting in the Middle East is Saudi Arabia. It's showing really robust growth, leading the region at over 4.3%. Turkey's also strong, above 4.1%. And then you have the UAE, Egypt, Qatar, all projected above 4.3% growth as well. It points to growing vehicle markets, perhaps expanding local assembly or manufacturing, alongside strong consumer demand in those economies.
Right. And finally, let's round out the regions with Africa. It actually represents a pretty substantial market already starting at over $2.3 billion in 2021. And it's projected to grow to about $3.5 billion by 2033, with an overall growth rate around 3.5%, maybe a touch lower than some other regions.
Well, what's striking about Africa is, as you said, the existing market size. It's already quite large, indicating a big number of vehicles currently in use. But the growth rates are varied. Nigeria, for instance, has a huge market share in revenue terms, over $870 million back in 2021. But its projected growth rate is a bit lower, around 3.2%.
So a large but maybe slower growing market there.
Potentially, or it could just reflect different economic conditions. Meanwhile, South Africa shows growth more in line with the average, around 3.7%, and the rest of Africa category actually shows stronger growth, nearly 3.9%. So it suggests, diverse stages of market development and opportunities across this really vast continent.
Okay, so we've toured the globe, looked at all these numbers, these growth rates, North America, Europe, Asia, Pacific, South America, Middle East, Africa, consistent growth pretty much everywhere.
Yeah.
But let's bring it back. What does this actually mean for you listening to this? Why should we care about the market for, well, shift levers?
Yeah, it comes back to the report's main takeaway, I think. This steady growth across all these different regions, it reflects, and I'm quoting loosely here, evolving consumer demand, technological innovation, and regional economic dynamics. It's a really powerful reminder that these components, even ones that seem kind of basic or traditional, they're actually vital signs. They indicate these much bigger trends in vehicle production, in sales, all around the world. The numbers really encourage you to think about how the global car market is actually operating. It's clearly still thriving and expanding in many places. And it's not just about flashy new tech, it's about foundational parts too. The health of this specific market tells us the global auto industry isn't just one single story. It's complex. It's moving at different speeds in different places, with traditional tech and new tech growing side by side.
That's a great summary. And it really does challenge that common narrative, doesn't it? If this component, so fundamental to gasoline cars, is still growing so steadily almost everywhere,
Yeah.
what does that really tell us about how fast the whole industry is transforming? Maybe traditional and new technologies are coexisting and evolving together more closely than we sometimes assume, or is the big shift just happening at very different speeds depending where you look?
And that leaves a really interesting question for you to chew on, doesn't it? In a world buzzing about automation, about giant touchscreens replacing everything, about EVs taking over, what's the real ongoing role of these, traditional mechanical parts? How does their continued market strength, this growth we've been talking about, reflect the perhaps slower, more nuanced reality of adopting truly revolutionary changes across all these diverse global markets?
It definitely makes you think about how long certain technologies stick around and that complex dance between, the excitement of innovation and the reality of established demand worldwide.